In late January of 2001, Sega shook the gaming world when they announced their near immediate exit from the console industry, all but abandoning the 2-year-old Dreamcast. That console had a loyal following and a great library of games, but the writing was on the wall. The DC wasn't going to survive in a world after the PlayStation 2. What ensued was Sega's full-on shift from a console manufacturer to a third-party software publisher. And while they released games for each of the remaining 6th-generation machines, no console seemed to embody the spirit of the Dreamcast quite like the Microsoft Xbox. So in this video, let's take a look at the history of Sega's support for Microsoft's debut console in the months after their transition to a third party, and a few of their most notable Xbox exclusives, and how Sega tried to keep the dream alive well after the Dreamcast's fall from grace. How is it going, everyone? My name is Evan. Welcome back to the evilslaw channel. Very quickly, if you guys enjoy this video, all I ask is that you hit that subscribe button. If you have not already, we're on the road to 10K. And also, if you have any memories of Sega's original days after the Dreamcast, during the Dreamcast, the Xbox, anywhere in between, leave me a comment and let's start a discussion there. That is my favorite part about making these videos. But enough talk. Let's get into it. The Sega Dreamcast released in November of 1998 in Japan, and it made its way to both the United States and most of Europe in the latter half of 1999. It released to critical and commercial success, selling very well out of the gate, and here in the US, it served as a great palate cleanser after the failure of the Sega Saturn. For a console with such a short lifespan, the Dreamcast amassed a library full of stone-cold classic games, and the system's built-in modem proved to be a true point of innovation. Online gaming was a huge focus, with games like Phantasy Star Online engrossing millions within its rich, ever-connected world. The main problem with the Dreamcast wasn't the Dreamcast, it was what was on the horizon. Months before the DC's American launch, Sony unveiled the PlayStation 2, a DVD-powered monster which immediately drew insane hype and shattered pre-order records. Despite this early success, Dreamcast sales began to slow just a few months after its release, with Sega of America president Peter Moore estimating that the console needed to sell at least 5 million units throughout the year 2000 to remain viable. But the Dreamcast would end up coming up 2 million short of that goal. In that time, the PlayStation 1 outsold the Dreamcast 5-1, as American gamers proved patient, and they waited for the PS2 despite lingering stock issues. Sega's best efforts to shove the Dreamcast in people's homes through rebates and giveaways would only work to compound the company's deepening financial problems. The writing was on the wall, and just 3 months after the PS2's US launch, Sega waved the white flag and threw in the towel. The Dreamcast was dead, along with Sega's entire console business. They'd liquidate the remaining consoles for as low as $50 while supporting it through the end of 2001, eventually restructuring to become a flagship third-party software developer. With the Dreamcast out of the picture, Sega was then left with 3 options to rebuild its business. The PlayStation 2, which had just destroyed them, longtime rival Nintendo and the GameCube, and industry newcomer Microsoft and the soon-to-be-released Xbox. After years of consecutive losses, Sega was in no position to rule out any releases for any one platform, but it's hard to deny that they had a keen interest in one particular option. Not only was the Xbox the most powerful machine of the generation, but Sega already had an established rapport working with Microsoft. The two companies collaborated to bring the Dreamcast online through onboard Windows CE integration, and they both believed online gaming was the future of the medium. But that effort allowed Microsoft to get an up-close look at the inner workings of the gaming industry, a move which former Sega of America president Bernie Stolar categorized as a, quote, Trojan horse on Microsoft's part. At one point, the computer giant even considered buying Sega outright, though that deal never materialized. You can even see echoes of the Dreamcast hardware within the Xbox itself, of course with the adoption of Xbox Live and online play, but also in the controller design. Both the DC and Xbox have very similar button layouts, and the top half of both controllers are almost identical, featuring analog triggers and 2 expansion slots. At one point, there was even talks of Xbox being fully backwards compatible with existing Dreamcast games. According to reports, Sega chairman Isao Okawa met with Bill Gates several times to discuss the idea, though disagreements over online support for old Dreamcast games ended the possibility. Regardless, in 2001, Sega and Microsoft announced a new strategic alliance, with Sega pledging to support the Xbox with over 10 exclusive games throughout the console's launch window. The deal ended up being mutually beneficial. Sega needed a rebound desperately, and Microsoft wanted to shore up Japanese support to help their console break through in that crucial market. The Xbox would go on to release in late 2001 here in the US and everywhere else shortly after in Q1 of 2002. What followed from Sega was a litany of titles, but more importantly, these games weren't just Sonic or sports titles, though a lot of them were sports titles. But what we got was Sega still operating at a high level, with several releases being direct continuations of existing Dreamcast games or other franchises from the company's expansive list of properties. In many ways, these games echoed what Sega was doing on the Dreamcast, and they continued with a high standard of quality. So let's take a look at just a few of those games and how the dream continued onto the Xbox. Full disclosure, this won't be an exhaustive look at every Sega title released for the Xbox. Instead, think of it as a tasting of what gamers could expect from Sega's offerings throughout the year 2002, the first full year of the Xbox's life. Starting out, I want to quickly talk about all of the sports games. There's a lot of them, and I won't be talking about all of them, but they were a key aspect of Sega's rebound as a third-party publisher. The first one was NFL 2K2, released for the Xbox in January of 2002, and also hit the PS2 and GameCube the year prior. 2K2 prettied up a port of a Dreamcast game of the same name, and if you've ever played them, these Sega sports games of the era were just very high quality. These titles are still worth going back to, even as just a look back into a time before EA dominated this branch of the industry. Perhaps the defining game of Sega's early Xbox ambitions is Jet Set Radio Future, the follow-up to the Dreamcast classic released 2 years earlier. And it's a fitting start to Sega's unspoken extension of the Dreamcast on Xbox, given that this briefly started its life as a Dreamcast game. Developed by Sega's internal studio Smilebit, it would be the first of Smilebit's 3 Xbox releases in 2002, and this one was positioned as a key day one title for the console's Japanese launch. Jet Set Radio Future takes place in the year 2024, so some kind of future, and you join a ragtag group of roller skaters looking to cover Neo Tokyo in your signature brand of graffiti. The game is rather light on the story, but none of that matters because it's so much fun to play. Instead of traditional platforming, Jet Set Radio is built around maintaining momentum, grinding rails, chaining tricks, wall riding, and finding creative routes through a semi-open world. Missions usually revolve around covering up enough of the opposing gang's graffiti before some encounter with the police ensues. The controls are simple to pick up, but mastering the game's flow is what makes it so satisfying. Once you're moving at full speed, linking tricks and grinds together, it's an unbelievably satisfying experience. I think the controls do need a little bit of getting used to these days, especially with a lack of camera movement, but it's nothing too bad really, and the game has aged quite well. One aspect where this game has not lost a step though is its sense of style. It's a vibe truly rivaled by very few other titles, and the music by the CEO of Funky Fresh Beats, Hideki Nagamura, is just the icing on the cake. Upon its release, Jet Set Radio Future reviewed really well. It currently holds an 88 out of 100 on Metacritic, and I can easily say it's one of the best experiences on the original Xbox. It's also one of the easiest titles to find on the console, leaving little excuse not to have it in your collection. GunValkyrie is the second of 3 games developed by Smilebit, also released in 2002 exclusively for the Xbox. GunValkyrie started development, also like Jet Set Radio Future, as a Dreamcast game before development shifted over to the Xbox, and it's certainly one that has drawn a lot of division over the years. Some people absolutely love it, while others swear against it. Set in an alternate version of 1906 where the British Empire gained control of advanced technology and space, the game involves 2 soldiers sent on a mission to investigate a British colony on the faraway planet of Tir na Nog, one in which everyone has disappeared and now finds itself littered with bug-like aliens. The plot setup is somewhat interesting, I'll say. The thing that dominates the discussion around this game is the controls. Writing this video, it's almost hard to explain. Simply put, the game looks like a third-person shooter, but it doesn't control like one, or at least one you'd expect. The left stick controls movement in a tank-like fashion, while the right stick controls your character's aim and upper body. But jetpacking and rocket boosting around the map is a big thing in this game. If you want to boost while moving left or right, you need to click in the left stick while moving it to your desired direction. Turning is not easy to do. Funny enough, apparently when this game was in development for Dreamcast, they proposed a control scheme involving playing the game with a controller in your left hand and a light gun in your right. The result is a game with a steep and brutal learning curve, and it shows in the reviews of its day. IGN notably gave it a 9, and GamePro gave it a 4, so these reviews were all over the place. Whatever your thoughts on GunValkyrie may be, it's hard to deny that this was an important title for Sega during the Xbox launch window, especially so in Japan, where they aired dedicated commercials for the game. GunValkyrie may not be perfect, but it's got that uniquely Sega flair to it. It was one of the few titles to make a direct Dreamcast to Xbox jump throughout the course of its development. Sega GT 2002 is an exclusive simulation racing game, a genre which became quite crowded within the Xbox library. and I will be the first to admit I'm no expert in this style of game at all, but I did have a good time during the few races I played for this video. GT 2002 is the follow-up to Dreamcast's Sega GT, and for all intents and purposes, this is Sega's answer to Sony's Gran Turismo. Just like in that game, the core loop involves you buying a starter car, completing races to earn cash, and using that cash to upgrade your cars or buy new ones entirely. The driving is realistic yet still satisfying, and after each race, the game takes you through a replay mode where you can snap 6 of your favorite shots from throughout the race, which I really enjoyed. Before the release of Forza Motorsport in 2005, Sega GT was the quintessential sim racer on the platform and would be bundled in with Jet Set Radio Future and packed in with future Xbox consoles before the end of 2002. The ensuing 2-in-1 release is the reason why both of these titles are extremely common and quite cheap. It's a must-have for anyone's Xbox collection, and just get the 2-pack, it's so cheap. The Dreamcast was where House of the Dead really captured a foothold with console gamers, so it made sense for the series to continue, even when the DC did not. House of the Dead 3 is, as you'd expect, a port of the arcade game of the same name, and since it was made on a Sega arcade board built using Xbox architecture, this is as great of a port as it gets. House of the Dead 3 is a light gun rail shooter where you endlessly mow down zombies until your heart's content. Especially so in this third entry because the zombie outbreak from the first game has now spread throughout the entire globe. This Xbox version offers little in terms of differences versus the arcade, and the Mad Catz official licensed light gun doesn't draw the best reviews ever, but if you have a CRT and an hour to kill, this could be a pretty good time. The Xbox version also contains a full port of House of the Dead 2 as an unlockable extra, further bolstering the light gun shooting value of this entire package. Crazy Taxi was the first of Sega's backlog to make the jump to competing platforms, with the original entry arriving on the PS2 and GameCube in 2001 with the help of Acclaim. But the game never came to the Xbox, and there was a reason for that. It's because Sega was saving a brand new entry for Microsoft's platform. Like the name implies, Crazy Taxi 3 High Roller dares to go big, introducing a new Las Vegas-themed map, Glitter Oasis, along with the 2 core maps from both previous Crazy Taxi games. West Coast, Small Apple, and the Crazy Box are all back, making this perhaps the most feature-rich Crazy Taxi game to date. In terms of gameplay, it looks and feels just like the first 2 games, but with the addition of multi-customer pickups and a Crazy Hop, which allows you to jump whenever you please. It's a fun mechanic and provides the game a distinct flair, though do be warned, it fundamentally changes how you will approach this game versus its predecessors. Personally, I love Crazy Taxi for pick up and play sessions. It's a perfect game for it. All of the licensed music is fully intact, and so are the KFCs and the Tower Records locations. The only downside is some noticeable performance issues in the new map, Glitter Oasis, but overall, Crazy Taxi 3 is a great time. Shenmue II is the sequel to the iconic Dreamcast original, and what was once the most expensive video game ever produced. And in most parts of the world, this sequel was also a Dreamcast game, except here in North America. You see, after the DC's discontinuation, Microsoft scooped up the exclusivity right to Shenmue II, releasing the game for the Xbox about a year after it released to the Dreamcast in Japan and Europe. To help deal with continuity issues for new players, Sega included this Shenmue the movie disc, but it hardly captures all of the great things the first game had to offer.
I'm broke! I can't afford to drink!
Oh well, later.
Anyway though, Shenmue 2 on Xbox is a pretty straightforward port, with some slight graphical upgrades and English voice acting, but it is missing the Dreamcast save transfer feature that worked with the first game. If you like slow burns with deep stories and lots of different gameplay styles, you'll likely find something to like here. I don't want to go into too much detail as to preserve the very, very important story, but it continues the tale of Ryo Hazuki and his quest to find the man who killed his father. Since this game is so heavily story-driven and is a direct continuation, it's kind of hard to jump right into Shenmue 2. It was an important title of its day, but if you do want to play these games now, I would recommend just going the modern route and playing the Shenmue 1 and 2 remasters on PS4 and Xbox One. I'm going to cheat a little bit here. Panzer Dragoon Orta technically released in 2003 here in the States, but it came to Xbox in 2002 over in Japan. And since it's one of Sega's most iconic releases for the platform, I'll make an exception. Panzer Dragoon Orta is the 4th entry in the Panzer Dragoon series and the last original entry in the franchise to date. Like the first 2 games in the series, Orta is an on-rail shooter similar to the likes of a Star Fox, except here you're riding on the back of a dragon, working to free Orta from the shackles of imprisonment and those of her own destiny. Developed by Smilebit, again, Orta stands as one of the finest rail shooters ever released, with everything from the graphics, music, and gameplay coming together to make a fantastic overall package. It's a beautiful game, even 20 years later, and the soundtrack is expertly crafted to match each moment in every level. The gameplay is tough, and I recommend if you're playing it for the first time, play it on easy. But the game is never unfair. Instead, it demands players to improve their skills and better utilize the 3 forms you can switch between with your dragon. The game lasts for about 10 levels, and it's relatively short. You can beat it in about 3 to 4 hours, but many of the levels contain branching paths, and there's a whole bunch of side missions you'll unlock as you progress. There's even an unlockable port of the first Panzer Dragoon game, which is a huge bonus. You'll get it after you complete the main story, and it's not a conversion of the Sega Saturn game, but the first game's PC port. Notably, the game presents a slightly blurry image and the performance doesn't feel as smooth as it does on the Saturn. If you can, I'd still recommend you play it there, but if that's not an option, well, this will do you just fine. Panzer Dragoon Orta reviewed extremely well upon its release back in 2002 and 3, and today it maintains a 9 out of 10 on Metacritic, and it's also my favorite game out of all of the ones I'm talking about today. I highly recommend it to anyone who has an Xbox and anyone looking for a uniquely Sega experience. By 2003, Sega's support for the Xbox was still going strong. That year, the company would continue to pump out successful releases like Sonic Heroes, the port of Phantasy Star Online Episodes 1 and 2, the first entry in From Software's Otogi series, and they'd continue with their strong run of sports games. Also around this time, Sega of America president Peter Moore would leave the company, instead going to Microsoft to head up Xbox, where he'd famously reveal Halo 2's release date by tattooing it on his own skin. But understandably, the Xbox wasn't the only basket Sega was placing their eggs in, which again, really wasn't a strategy they could afford to do. Perhaps that's why Sega's plan for multi-platform releases became a bit more clear come 2003. Xbox was, for a while, the home of Sega's latest and greatest. Releases included cutting-edge entries in some of their biggest franchises, with many of those games being developed in-house at Sega rather than from their publishing partners. The GameCube was home to more family-friendly releases, along with a big push to ingrain Sonic the Hedgehog within the minds of Nintendo fans. The Cube would receive exclusive ports of both Sonic Adventure titles, the first release of Sonic Mega Collection before it went multi-platform, and here in the US, the Sonic Gems Collection would be a platform exclusive. As for the PlayStation 2, Sega support started off relatively light. They pushed out all of their sports games and a bunch of re-releases, including games like Rez, Crazy Taxi, Virtua Fighter, and the Sega Ages compilations. Light exclusive support came in the form of titles like Shinobi and Nightshade, but come 2004 and the acquisition of Sega by the Sammy Corporation, releases on PS2 became much more common. Soon, the heavy hitters would roll in, and we'd get games like Yakuza. The extreme install base of the PS2 certainly made it hard to ignore for long, and that console would go on to become Sega's most supported of the generation, with over 150 releases. As for the Xbox, it would receive around 50 games, good for second most between the 3 competing machines of the era. Sales for Sega titles here in the United States were generally solid, with this chart from IGN in 2002 showing decent success despite the Xbox's smaller install base. As you can see though, the runaway hits were reserved for Nintendo and Sony consoles. In some ways, it's hard to categorize Sega's Xbox venture as a failure. The console played a nice role in helping the company regain profitability, and they'd go on to release more notable titles late in the console's life like Outrun 2, Shadow the Hedgehog, Super Monkey Ball Deluxe, and Otogi 2. At the dawn of the 7th console generation, Sega would continue to support Microsoft through the Xbox 360 and for future generations after that. In 2021, they even launched another strategic alliance to support Sega's Super Game initiative, one which unfortunately ended in failure. However, there's 2 sides to every coin, and while Sega's titles performed well here in the States, they did little to sway the Japanese market towards the Xbox. It performed dreadfully. In the first week of April of 2002, the console only sold 2.1 thousand units across all of Japan. That's just 2 months after launch, yet it was being outsold by the PlayStation 1, the WonderSwan, and even the Dreamcast. Jet Set Radio Future and GunValkyrie had both sold less than 10,000 units in that same time frame. The Xbox just wasn't going to be a hit in Japan. As much as they tried, the sentiment never swung in Microsoft's favor, and to this day, it still hasn't. But perhaps the biggest casualties of Sega's post-Dreamcast transition were the franchises that had become synonymous with its Xbox partnership. During the early 2000s, series like Shenmue and Panzer Dragoon seemed poised for a bright future, only to disappear for more than a decade. We wouldn't get Shenmue 3 until 2019, and Panzer Dragoon was completely dormant until the lackluster remake of the first game dropped in 2020. Games like GunValkyrie never got a follow-up, and while Sega published ToeJam and Earl 3 for the Xbox, they're not even involved with the franchise anymore. Outrun is seemingly missing in action, save for an upcoming Michael Bay movie, and after 20 years, we're finally just now getting new games in the Crazy Taxi and Jet Set Radio franchises, 2 of the 3 survivors from the aforementioned Super Game fiasco. Thankfully, if you want to collect some of Sega's Xbox titles these days, it's a pretty accessible thing to do. The original Xbox is a great console to collect for, with systems and games still selling for reasonable prices on the secondhand market, despite growing demand for seemingly all things 6th generation. You can find pretty much all of Sega's offerings for under $50 US, save for the Otogi games. Blame it on the 2 words From Software. And Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast is one of the top 5 most expensive games for the system, but realistically, its price tag is not too much compared to some of the top-end games on the GameCube and PS2, so take that as another reflection of how affordable the Xbox remains to this day. If you have an Xbox One or Series X, both Otogi games, Panzer, Dragoon, Orta, and GunValkyrie are all backwards compatible, and you can also download them digitally through the Xbox Store. Still though, you'll need original hardware to play some of the marooned games like Crazy Taxi 3 and Jet Set Radio Future, which is a real shame. And one final thought before I end this video, real talk, why haven't we gotten a modern port of Sonic Heroes yet? Come on guys, let's go. But anyway, that's all I have for this video. Let me know down in the comments, do you guys have any great memories around this time playing Sega games on Xbox during the launch window, after the launch window? I don't care. Let me know your memories down below and let's move the conversation to the comment section. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you all in the next one. I hope you have a great day, great night, whatever it be. Take it easy, everyone.